Erin. Everybody meet Erin Jacobson, a music attorney in Los Angeles, entertainment attorney, not just music.
Really just music.
Oh, didn't know that. I thought because you worked with me and I'm so entertaining that would classify you as an entertainment attorney.
Well, we could classify it that way. But no, I mean, the practice is really focused on music and copyright related to music. So
awesome. Well, why don't you do your little preamble about how this isn't legal advice, and then we can just rip right into it.
All right. So anything I say here today is not legal advice. It's for informational and educational purposes only. It doesn't pertain to anybody's specific issue. You should check with an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. And if anything I say is an advertisement, it's general in nature, not directed towards any particular person. And nothing I say, any questions I answer, anything like that does not create an attorney-client relationship with anyone asking questions or watching this broadcast, unless anybody that's actually my client is watching this. So. Exactly. So, well, there's the spiel.
Yeah, I am her client. Anyway, this is just a wide open Q&A, but I would really appreciate if the questions could be succinct and not so specific. Like I wrote a song in 1973, and my partner that wrote it with me is, horrifically mentally incapacitated, can't sign the paperwork, blah, 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 blah. We don't want to take 1 hour on one question. If you have a question, please write the word question in all caps and then type the question after it, preferably in sentence case. And while you guys are getting your questions in the chat, I'm going to lead off with a question that's very apropos. Erin, at the Physical Road Rally, Adam Taylor, who is the CEO of APM Music and also the chairman of the Production Music Association, he and I spent quite a bit of time talking about AI, which, everybody wants to know about AI. And he was a great interviewee, and he's not so worried. And yet I see so many musicians that are kind of scared to death that AI is going to replace them in short order. Can you give us like 2 or 3 big bullet points about AI and why musicians shouldn't be freaking out yet, or maybe ever?
Well, I mean, the thing with AI is at the time that we're recording this, it's still so new. As far as its uses in the industry and what people are using it for, and so a lot of it just remains to be seen. From a copyright perspective, the Copyright Office has said that for a work to be protected by copyright, it has to be created by a human. So there's people get into a lot of nitty-gritty about well, what if I use AI, but it's still something that I create? And so at this point, there's sort of a distinction of, did you just use like an AI instrument to help, but you still created everything, put it all together? Or was it like you just typed in a prompt and said, I need a happy, smooth jazz composition 30 seconds long or something like that, and then the AI generates it. So in that case, when you're typing in a prompt, that is generated by AI. It's not going to be protected. If you're just, like I said, using an instrument or something like that, or some sort of component, you're still creating the work, then you would still be able to get copyright protection for the work, but potentially certain elements would be excluded. As far as how this is going to impact musicians, work and getting gigs and things like that, especially in the composer realm, I think at this point everything's going to have its place. Right now, the AI isn't that good in a lot of respects.
Well, it speaks highly of you.
It does.
Yes.
Well, in that case, that particular AI is very good now. But musically, it's still not quite as good as humans. As the technology develops, it will get better. So I think at that point, there's maybe more of a discussion as far as, is it going to replace humans? But I think, there are certain types of shows or maybe productions on a budget or productions that don't want to pay for music that maybe use a lot of cues. Maybe they're just kind of background throwaway cues that, in an effort to save money and time, maybe they will use AI. They might use it for everything. They might, need a cue at the last minute and just need something quickly and grab something that'll work. But I think there are also projects that are going to want a human that is able to create it, that is able to collaborate with them, and respond to them in a way that AI maybe won't. So, like I said, there's still a lot of unknowns, but it's my hope, at least, that it's not going to completely overtake composers. And there's, yes, some people may use AI for certain purposes, but that there will still be, the need for composers and for a human creating custom artistry.
Something that gives me comfort. 18 months to 2 years ago, I had many meetings with a brand name AI company in the music space that created AI that compared a reference, like find me something that sounds like this. Mm-hmm. And obviously that would be very useful for libraries that are searching their own catalogs to make pitches. Mm-hmm. And the reason when I finally literally met them by accident, the president of the company said, "Oh my gosh, I've been trying to connect with you forever," which I'm not that hard to find, but okay, let's assume that was true.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, and I said, why me? Why Taxi? Mm-hmm. And he said, because AI, even our AI, and theirs was very sophisticated. They built a lot of things into it that other people hadn't thought of, and they executed really well on it. They said it still needs a human being to talk to the music supervisor, talk to the library, and interpret their needs. Almost anybody in the sync side of the business will tell you that it's very difficult for music supervisors and library owners to really hit the nail on the head every time when they're trying to describe what kind of music they need. So
especially when you have a producer going like, it needs to be more green, right?
Yeah. I always get purple, but yes, absolutely. Yeah. So because Taxi has become so expert over 32 years at interpreting what it is that they mean, they wanted Taxi to be very involved with rolling out their AI so that we could do the interpretation. Garbage in, garbage out is the bottom line. So they wanted Taxi to make sure that it wasn't garbage going into the AI, and then have Taxi's human being screeners check the end result before the music shipped out to the end user. And that's going to be true for many, if not all, forms of AI as they relate to the music industry. So yes, is there the potential that an editor working in a cubicle at 10 o'clock at night, right now they have to go into an electronic bucket that's got dramedy cues and, happy clappy cues, whatever, and they've got to go pull up a category, a genre, and look at a list of 78 cues in that category, and the titles are the things that will attract them to hit the play button and audition until they find something that will work in the scene. Whereas the future may be with AI that the editor could simply hit a talk button on their keyboard. And much like we say, Alexa, turn on my bedroom lights, at least we do in the Laskow household. you could say, an editor could say, AI, find me music that's appropriate for the scene. You don't even have to say, find me dramedy or find me happy clappy. It would know by the dialogue what the emotion is in the scene and be able to generate an original AI created piece of music on the spot. So that possibility does exist for the future, but that's a long way off, because that will be a day with no good prompt. The editor's not going to say, give me a happy clappy track, but instead of claps, let's try muted tambourine, and make sure they're pitched an octave up and blah, 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 blah. So editors aren't going to have the vocabulary necessarily to do that. So I, too, am not that worried. One more AI question, then we'll move on to somebody's not asking a question, they're making a comment.
Okay. Well, I think to your point, Michael, there's multiple uses there, because there's a use for AI just to help an editor go through an existing library and pull tracks. But then there's also taking it one step further, will the AI generate a new track based on a scene? So I think there's definitely the potential to use AI to help people do their jobs better and faster, but then is it going to go that extra step to where it's actually replacing certain people's jobs? And there's another point to AI right now, which is a big controversy, in that AI has to be trained. So it has to use existing material to be able to generate new material. And so within the music industry, there's a big problem right now, because, and you have some of the major companies suing some of the AI companies right now, because some of the AI companies are using existing copyrighted music and master recordings to train their AI software.
Right.
And that constitutes reproductions and all kinds of things that are copyright infringement, that these are unauthorized reproductions within their training process. And so there's, we'll see what happens with that. But at the time that we're recording this, there's lawsuits happening right now with music companies saying that these AI companies are infringing, and the AI companies are saying it's fair use. And so, we'll have to see how they rule on these issues.
I'm just going to stick with AI because nobody's asking any questions in the chat, and you and I could definitely do 45 more minutes on this, I think. Here's another issue that I see on the horizon, which is a network. Let's say I'm just picking NBC out of the air because the three letters popped into my head, but I believe that NBC is very strict about which libraries can and cannot be used by the productions that hit their air. They want to make sure everything is buttoned up and kosher on any sort of legal licensing issues. So will a network like NBC, ABC, CBS, any of the nets, whether they're broadcast or cable, I don't believe they're going to be comfortable using stuff that, until legislation has been passed and everything is completely buttoned up, which we know this is not going to move fast. It's going to take years. So, yeah, you could create the best music in the world with AI starting tomorrow, let's say. There's not going to be anybody, at least in the professional world, that's going to be willing to use it because they don't want to be named in a massive class action lawsuit. Because a bunch of musicians who had their music in a catalog all can be a party to this class, and they're just not going to do it. So for that reason alone, if I were musicians, I wouldn't be sweating it so much yet.
There's time.
Yeah, exactly. And okay, so let's talk about a couple of cases where companies had a contract that there was no this couldn't be foreseen so easily, but the contract that the musicians signed with the libraries, and I believe that these were royalty-free libraries, I obviously won't name them, and everybody got very upset that the libraries allowed their data, their music, to become data and train the AI for these other companies, and clearly they had a contract that was so broadly all encompassing that nobody could sue them over this. And yeah, musicians got a check for $142, 27 bucks and 62 cents, whatever. And they're like, hey man, I got paid. So that is, legally they were entitled to do that. Would any network be comfortable using that music as well, because that contract was in fact broadly and generally inclusive enough that they could do that?
Yeah, I mean, that I think is going to depend on the network and their risk tolerance, and they're probably going to want to analyze the contracts and make sure the rights were, really broad enough to do that. And so that's more of a fact dependent situation. I think it's maybe more likely in that case than in the first example that you brought up. But, again, these networks are not going to want, 100 different composers, coming after them. So I think, if I was representing the network that wanted to do that, I would say, we really need to look at what the rights were and what does this open us up to any liability and that sort of thing. So I think in that case, it's going to be fact dependent on the network, on the library, on the contract language that the library has with the musicians, stuff like that. So.
Okay, here's another AI question. And I've learned so much from you over the years we've known each other that I can ask relatively intelligent questions. At least I think they are,
I think you ask intelligent questions.
Okay, so now let's take the scenario that company that had broad, generally encompassing language in their contract.
The library company.
Yeah, the library.
Yeah.
And they've got 10,000 composers in there. And let's say that on average, each composer had 5 things. So they've got 50,000 tracks, which is kind of a mid to large size library. And that stuff is getting used. Now, a piece of AI music is created from that music that trained the AI. Moving forward, is there any equitable or fair way to compensate these musicians? Because who the heck would know? I mean, just so everybody understands, if you're not that familiar with AI, it's not actually sampling your music. Like, there's a guitar note, and we're just going to record that guitar note as a digital thing and then play it back. It's looking at many different aspects and learning what it was that went into making that guitar note. That's why it's artificially intelligent. It's going, oh, well, it sounds like this, and it's played like that, and it's got this audio spectrum, and blah, 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 blah. So let's say that in the end, a piece of music gets spit out of this AI thing, and it used data from 1,461 different pieces of music, or maybe 100,000 pieces of data, whatever it is. How the heck could you ever compensate anybody? Because you don't really. Maybe we need AI to figure out what AI is doing in this case, because it's not like you're taking, 5 seconds of the chorus or, this vocal line. It's data, and who knows how much of your data. Erin Jacobson, piano player with whatever, how much of your data has gone into this new composition? I don't know how you could ever figure out a way to pay anybody.
I mean, the first thought that comes to my mind, and, this is me expounding ideas that, without using the AI program, if the AI has some sort of background information of, these pieces of data were used to create this new piece. Maybe it's like some sort of proportionate split for all of, the writers for all of those pieces or something like that. But I think, at that point, like if you're using 14,000 pieces of music to influence one new piece, I mean, your royalty rates are going to be worse than streaming, right?
If that's even possible, yeah.
20 zeros, like, and then maybe a number. So, I also think that would be an accounting nightmare for the company.
Oh, yeah.
And in which case I think a company would be, I'm not saying that they would necessarily do this, but I think it would be very likely that a lot of companies would say, we paid them on the front, more of the front end. We own this AI piece of music, and whatever income we get from it is just income from our company, and we're not going to be compensating people individually. So I think that's part of it. The other part of it is, are there any royalties really to even be generated on the AI pieces? Because again, if you're just, even though it was trained on music created by real people, if you're just typing a prompt into your own database, and it's spitting something out, I think there's an argument that there's no human authorship in that. And then in which case, there's no copyright ownership. So then there's likely no royalties to follow from that. So it's possible that, they're doing this and they're not making money off it anyway. I don't know.
Wow,
so again,
that's
this is where we have all these different scenarios that are really, not in practice. So we don't exactly know how they're going to be treated, and people are going to treat them how they decide to treat them at the time. And, it's kind of putting the music industry back in a little bit of a Wild West situation, because we don't exactly know what's going to happen with the technology. And it's also possible it's not going away, but it's not going to be as big of a deal as everybody's thinking too. I mean, we just don't know. I mean, there's the whole other side of it where you have artists that are actively using AI and things like that. And, and that's like part of who they are as an artist. And so it's kind of like the possibilities are endless, and we just don't really know yet.
Well, as far as the accounting goes, I'm sure they could replace their entire accounting department with AI.
With AI. Well, that was, I think, part of also, not that it's necessarily the same thing, but that was part of the argument with using blockchain, because everything was automatic. But, there's some use, but it didn't, take over the whole industry like some people were thinking it might also.
There is a youngish lady who works at one of the popular with Taxi members production music libraries, who I think has she and I and one other person were on a Zoom on a completely unrelated subject, and we stumbled onto this one night, and I kept thinking the whole time, I need to get you on a Zoom with her. You would really enjoy the conversation. For being a layperson and not a lawyer, wow, she had such a deep understanding of all this that I felt like I couldn't keep up with the conversation. And that we also talked about blockchain a lot as well. And she was very much for it. I know what blockchain is. I know it's distributed ledgers. And everybody says, oh, it's much safer. But come on, blockchain has been hacked. Crypto has been hacked. NFTs have been hacked. Everything can be hacked. There's always some guy in some Eastern European country that's got nothing but time on his hands that's going to figure out a way to hack this stuff. So I don't know that I'm such a fan of the whole idea, but we do have a couple questions now. This one's from Peaches Cranko, and she says, this came up at the rally, but is it okay to use royalty-free loops in our taxi submissions?
I would say no. Just because they're royalty free doesn't mean that somebody doesn't own them. I mean, if it's, if it's something like, this happened like a long time ago when it was like copyright versus Creative Commons and like what people could use and what they couldn't and stuff. But I always say, if you didn't create it or you don't have a license for from someone that did create it, then I wouldn't use it, because I mean, I know that people have had problems with library submissions, even for using like when they subscribe to those like instrument loop sites and stuff like that.
Right,
They've had
something like
problems with,
Splice. Yeah.
yeah, they've had problems with libraries accepting that music as well. So I think it's asking for potential trouble.
Right. So the musician, and again, I'm not an attorney, but as I
Yeah,
understand it, and again, I'm just not that intelligent. So sometimes I feel like I don't
that's
understand.
not true,
I
Michael.
feel like I don't understand these big concepts. But
No.
using a loop that you get from Splice, you have a license. They grant you a license because you paid for a subscription. But
Well,
there's a
you have
but.
to read what it says.
Yeah, which
Yeah,
nobody does. So it's
right.
the Wild West in that regard. But let's assume, for the sake of this argument, that you have been granted a license from the company that you subscribe to and you put the loop in. The libraries don't want to touch it for a couple of reasons. But the rule of thumb, and some libraries are more lenient, other libraries are like, absolutely not. And they're all run by people I know that are professional, intelligent people, but they have differing opinions. So if you use a sample, let's say that you use a harp glissando, and if it's buried in the track, first of all, if you alter it, you run it through a phaser and a delay, and you pitch it up and pitch bend it at the end and throw lots of reverb on it, so that if it ever stands on its own in the clear, that you couldn't tell just by listening to it that it was that original thing. Some libraries are okay with that. Other libraries are not. But the big item, or the big thing that scares them, is if it is ever in the clear by itself in an unaltered, recognizable state, that's a big no-no on everybody. The libraries feel that way. The people at the companies that you subscribe to and get these loops. And there's the issue of major artists that have used loops of beats all the time on their records, and they and their record labels get really upset when they hear a piece of production music that's got the exact same thing in it that their giant hit has. I don't really understand all the legalities of that, but
Well,
clearly it's an issue.
yeah, I mean, your explanation there, I mean, had multiple issues in it, because, like from the major record label part that you just mentioned, I mean, legal aside, I mean, there are legal issues there, but legal aside, they don't, they're spending a lot of money to put out a record and promote it and all this stuff. They don't want the same music in some other track.
Right.
So just from a business perspective, that makes sense. For the loop sites, and another kind of layer to the issue is sometimes the loop sites don't own the loops, because independent musicians can create and submit loops to these sites, and then they get paid every time somebody like downloads that loop, or what. Different sites have different structures on how they work, but for example, like I could create a loop and give it to whatever loop site, and depending on what the user license and everything is, it may not cover libraries, or different, like they cover sometimes like some uses and not other uses.
Right.
And I've had situations where people have done this and then said, oh, well, like the site said that I'm able to submit it to the library, but then when I go back and read all the fine print, I'm like, I don't think so. You can't do that. And then it's like, then the loop site's like going back on what they said, and it's like a whole thing. So, there's like potentially like layers of ownership there as well. So it's not just like, oh, I'm getting something from this site, so therefore this site must own it. Because They may not. They may
Right.
just have a license, and you don't know what that license is with the people that licensed it to them. So,
Yeah.
create your own music.
Yeah. I mean, that's the best advice, because that's what the libraries would tell you, would be create your own loop library and use that. And we're not even talking about like sampling, a Rolling Stone song or a Madonna
Right.
song, and just grabbing like a from a background
Right.
vocal and making something. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a mess. The digital world has been such a boon to music production, but it does open a can of worms that is so vast. The
Yeah, because
future.
technology is always moving faster than the law, and in these cases. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And, who do musicians really have to lobby Congress, at least in America, on their behalf? The PROs would be the obvious answer, because they've got, pretty big lobbying budgets and they're quite expert at lobbying. I think that the PROs are probably a little scared to death about the future and scrambling very quickly and deeply to figure out how are they even going to be valid moving forward.
Right.
Who needs them?
Well, I mean, there's a little bit of shakeup already because BMI is a for-profit company now. They've changed from a non-profit to a for-profit, and there's talk of the company being sold, and we'll see what happens with that. I mean, there are some independent publisher and songwriter groups that that do lobby, that are involved in that, but there's ones people can get involved with and stuff, but it's not like you have like some huge corporate machine like you do in other industries.
Yeah.
So
All right, let's move on to the next question. This one's from Katrina Seifert. With AI now being used in music searches, what is important to include for the best chance for our music to be found and get paid?
well, I think those are two different issues. Being found and getting paid are two different issues, I think. I
You're
mean, for the
very,
getting
very
found,
analytical in a
yeah,
good way.
that is my job. um, from the like being found part of the question, that is more of a marketing and SEO type thing. You're going to have to want to use the right keywords and find out, you know, what these kinds of things are looking for, and use the right keywords so that you'll come up in the search. And I mean, so it's sort of no different than internet marketing and product marketing and things
And
like that.
libraries have those
Yeah,
search engines built now that are
exactly.
primarily keyword driven, and frankly, that is, you don't need AI to do that. And when AI is assisting you in a search in the future, the keyword portion of the keywords will be a little bit important, but not nearly as they are now, because you're absolutely right. Right now, it's very analogous to SEO, or
Mm-hmm.
going onto YouTube and searching for a video. YouTube's engine is looking at the number of plays, the number of likes, the number of comments, the
The
keywords.
algorithm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all that stuff. So algorithmic searches are commonly used all over the place now, but AI thinks for itself, and trains itself with every request to get better and better. So honestly, again, me not being a lawyer, I would say, Katrina, that it's. I don't think there's anything you could really do now that. Think about how algorithms work on YouTube, and use that as your guide right now. But as far as AI, true AI's involvement, it's too early to know how much and the types of things it's going to look at. In my humble opinion, I wouldn't worry about it too much yet.
Um, so then the getting paid part, remind me the
Oh yeah,
question.
the
The
question
question
again
is
was
that she's
about.
generating original music. It's going to get found by AI so somebody can use it.
Right. So let's say that
Okay.
she's submitting a piece of music to a library. Is there anything she can do with that music to make it pop out more to AI? Number one, to get used, and number two, to get paid. So yes,
Okay.
I'm not even going to venture a guess on the getting paid part.
Well, I mean, I don't see that as being an AI issue. Really. I mean, if a library is using AI to search and pick out music, and so then her song pops up because she's put in the right keywords and that kind of stuff. Um, and she's created it, so we're going to assume that it's copyright protected or protectable, because it's created by a human. Um, so in that case, I would say, like, okay, if it's being used, in a reality TV show, let's say, um, it's the same royalty channels. So, that goes back to the stuff that we always talk about, is being registered with a performance rights organization, being registered with Harry Fox, Sound Exchange. If you are with a library, and it's the library that's submitting these things, making sure that your library is paying you. So, because they're often going to take care of mechanicals and things like that. And so it's, okay, but you want to make sure that you're getting your writer performance royalties and stuff. So, I mean, that part, unless I'm not understanding her question and there's like some other AI aspect that she's asking about, but if it's just, using AI as a tool to pick out certain songs that will be used in a traditional project, and, assuming that the music is copyrightable, it's the
Yeah.
same royalty stuff that we always talk about, um, and that's in my book and
Hold
all
the book. Do you
that.
have a
So
copy of the book?
I do.
You know where mine is.
I remembered to to
I'm
bring
not,
it.
buy this
Um,
book. I think definitely read it all the way through twice and maybe even a third time because, the title, once again, hold it back up again. Don't
I will.
get,
I'm going to show you the little chart too.
oh, okay.
So it's called "Don't Get Screwed: How to Protect Yourself." Wait, it was in
Yeah,
frame. It
you're
always
like me.
goes right over my
I
face.
know.
Yeah. Don't Get Screwed: How to Protect Yourself as an Independent Musician. We go over the basics of copyright, why it's important, all the different types of royalty streams. I even give you a lovely chart of different royalty streams. This is actually a multi-page chart of different royalty streams, what they're for, what you have to do, and who you have to sign up for to collect those royalty streams. And also going over different contract terms. We talk about different types of publishing and the splits and how those work, and copyright versus income splits. And I go over the main types of agreements that independent musicians encounter and how to not get screwed. And I give some real world examples. So sorry, I just hit my microphone there. But you can see it's a small book, stocking stuffer size, since the holidays are coming up. And but it's really meant to be like a handbook to really get the foundational basics, which frankly so many people still don't know, and there's still so many myths that go around. And I really wanted to give people that good foundation, to have a resource that they could come back to all the time. What is that royalty stream for again? What do I do with that? Or
You hit the important stuff.
so
I own all the books
yeah.
written by other entertainment and music attorneys, and I've read every one of them, going all the way back to Bill Krasilovsky's book, This Business of
This
Music.
Business of Music, yeah.
Yeah, I once shared a cab with Kraz in New York, and he spent the whole time yelling at me. It was weird. Anyway, those books are intimidating. They're complex, and they're kind of like Microsoft Word. They're 90% of what's in there you'll never use in your lifetime. everything that's in your book is stuff that everybody who's watching this video can use. It's the stuff we need to know. If they need a deeper dive, go pick up Kras's book, or I can't think of his name right. Another well-beloved music attorney, Don Passman's book is very good.
Right. Yeah, but that was part of the point of why I wrote this, is because while there are really great books, and I've read the books that you've mentioned, and they're great, but they don't go into the basic fundamentals. So I feel like this is like the first book, and then you can graduate to those other books, which will give you more information on top of what's in my book. It's available on Amazon.
You should write a version.
Hopefully the link's in the chat.
You should write a version for people who are on OnlyFans.
Okay.
Don't get screwed up by OnlyFans. Anyway, okay, I'm looking to see if I missed any. What if it creates?
Okay.
Oh, here's
everything's falling over now. Okay. It's my painting.
Aw. Okay, so here's one from Mary Ensign. Can I copyright the music of... this is a good one. Can I copyright the music of someone who passed away and left no heirs? They only had a contract with one song for 1 year. So I'm thinking that might be like two thoughts. It sounds like there's other music that's had no contract, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know. That's like a fact-specific one. I would have to read the contract and see the whole situation. I don't want to not answer this person's question, but at the same time, it's one of those questions that I don't think can be answered with no information, with that small amount of information.
Right. And just know that when you die and you walk through the pearly gates, that the person who created that music is going to be standing there with their hand out. So prepare for that.
Here, where's my check?
Right. I saw you down there making money from my music. Where's my friggin' check? I just saw another one in here. Info search says, what if AI creates the loop and you get a digital license to use the loop? Wow. AI creates the loop and you get a digital license to use the loop.
From who? The AI company?
I would assume so. So let's say, just speaking in a hypothetical here, that Splice or somebody had a category of these are all AI created loops.
So in that case, again, there's a lot of what ifs in this situation, but I'll assume for purposes of my answer that this person created the majority of the song and then just incorporated this one AI loop. And it's not like the majority of the song. In which case the original non-AI portion could be protected by copyright, but it would not include the AI loop.
Okay.
So that part would be excluded.
Wow. It's complex. Musicians, I know them well. They've been my entire adult life. Most musicians are somewhat resistant, as I'm sure you know, although you only get the people that are willing to pay for legal advice because they understand the importance of it. But most musicians feel like, hey, man, my job is to create. Can't somebody else just take care of this stuff? Well, yeah, they can, but you have to write them a check to do it. They're not going to do it because they think your music is so awesome. And it's burdensome, and I understand that. But we live in a world where you can't be unprotected because you could lose a house. So yeah, well,
I think what a great example of this is, a lot of the copyright cases that have been in the media in recent years. Taylor Swift getting sued, Ed Sheeran getting sued, Katy Perry getting sued. There are people, especially when a song is famous or a person is famous, there are other people that come out of the woodwork to sue, and yeah, these people are rich and famous, but they're still spending hundreds of thousands of dollars defending a lawsuit. And, they can more afford to do that than people that aren't famous, but still, it's like it's still costing them a lot of money and time and aggravation.
And reputational damage as well.
Yeah.
They could be completely innocent or they could be somewhat or a lot guilty. But yeah, you notice it's never poor people that get sued for copyright infringement. It's always somebody with
Because
deep
they don't have
pockets.
money.
Right, exactly. So yeah, it's like, be careful what you ask for because if you're successful, then you've got a target on your back. Here's a question from Richard Carr. Follow up to the last question. What if I create a loop using AI, then use it in my creative projects? Is it all mine? So, AI, make me a crazy loop that sounds like spaghetti hitting a wall with springs on it. And you get this loop, and who owns it? And can you, if I create the loop using AI, then use it in my creative projects, is it
Well, I feel
all?
like that's kind of the scenario that we just
Yeah.
um, answered. That if you're creating a song and this one part element of it is this AI loop, um, and the loop was created by AI, then that part would be excluded and not protected by copyright. But the original human created elements could be protected by copyright.
Yeah. And let's say that whatever catalog was scraped for the data that allowed you to create that AI loop, whatever legal
Well,
trouble they may or may not get into in the future might affect you. Nobody's probably going to come after you for using, a 15-second loop on a bridge of a song, especially unless you have a giant hit. Then they would be more than happy to
well,
make a
they'd also
test.
be more likely to hear it at that point. But I mean, but whether it's famous or not, it's still potentially infringement there. So again, it's there's so many permutations of scenarios that we could talk about, but it's all gonna like be worked out in practice.
Erin will be dead before this one gets worked out. I mean, seriously, file sharing, look what upheaval that caused. And Congress moved so unbelievably
That was
slow.
like it took like a good 10 years
Yeah,
to
glacial.
really for the industry to really like calm down after that.
Yeah. You know, Jim Griffith, or Jim Griffith, the guy who headed up the faux group, or faux if you want to pronounce it correctly, it was basically a think tank of a bunch of us that were early deep thinkers on the whole subject. And he always said the secret to stopping theft of music via file sharing, which I always hated that term. Let's just call it what it is. It was downright theft. But you can eliminate it by making music feel like it's free. And ultimately, technology caught up with the concept, and it got cheap enough to stream music that it felt free. $10 a month, all you can eat, or with ads, and it's free. So yeah, nobody's downloading anymore because they don't need to own it because it's everywhere whenever you want it. It's ubiquitous in the world, and therefore it feels free. And Jim was absolutely right. So I need to ask him how he feels about AI. Let's see if we've got, yeah, we've still got 11 minutes here. Nope, no good questions right now. Any big test cases or legal issues that you've come across? Because I know you obviously read legal trades and probably music specific. Anything that made you raise an eyebrow and go, oh, wow, that's interesting. If you were writing a second book, is there anything that you would include in it?
Well, I have lots of ideas for lots of books. Yeah, but I mean, recent stuff, I mean, cases recently have been more of these copyright infringement cases. There have been some cases coming up with the terminations for the recapture of copyrights. Those have definitely been interesting, at least for me, because I'm someone that does a lot of termination work. And for anyone watching that doesn't know what that is, basically there are certain mechanisms in the copyright law that after a certain period of time and after meeting lots of requirements, you can serve notices on people to get ownership of the copyrights back. It's a very complicated area, and a lot of it, again, is untested in practice. So there are a lot of issues coming up around it. One being, are masters terminable because work for hires are not terminable, and record contracts say that masters are work for hire, but masters are not one of the categories of work for hire works. So there's some class actions happening about that. There was actually an issue with Cher filing terminations, and Sonny Bono's, why is it Mary? Is that her name? Was contesting that. And so there was an issue happening with that. And I'm not sure what the status of that one is at the time we're having this conversation. But that was an interesting issue that came up. There was another. So there's been a variety of cases. Not all of them have really hit mainstream. But that's been a really interesting area to see how certain issues are playing out in practice. For that. Now, as I mentioned, we have this AI lawsuit where some of the major companies are suing some of these AI companies for infringement, for using their works for training. There's still a lot going on in the catalog world. I do work in the catalog acquisition world, and there's still a lot happening with the different funds, and how funds are being valued, and there's a company right now that isn't being valued at what they thought it was going to be valued, and so people are freaking out. And so there's definitely a lot of interesting things going on.
Who was it that I just heard somebody said, I'm not selling my catalog for $50 million or $100 million?
Mick Jagger?
No, somebody else wanted
There was an article about that.
Yeah, that he doesn't want to sell because...
he just basically said that, and this is just, I just read this in an article. I did not have a conversation with Mick or anything, but he said, I don't need to sell my catalog for $500 million because, my kids don't need $500 million. And, if we did sell it, maybe we would donate the proceeds to charity, because a lot of people have the theory that the reason why a lot of these older, artists and songwriters are selling their catalog is because then their heirs don't have to deal with inheriting and managing and owning a catalog, and so if they sell, they just get lots of money now, and they can just give the money to their heirs. And so I think
give the money to their fentanyl dealer. Sorry.
So I think that was kind of how it was posed to him, and he was like, I don't have to do that. So I think that was the, not to speak for him, but I think that was kind of what he was trying to say, but I don't know if that was maybe different than the person you were talking about.
It is. I can't remember who it was, but somebody, I think I saw it yesterday or the day before. There's no way I'm selling my catalog, blah, 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 but whatever, it's just, I feel like valuations have gotten crazy high on what catalogs are worth, 25x earnings and stuff like that. What?
So,
but no, but they're, whatever.
Well, it depends. I mean, there are crazy evaluations. The market did get very crazy, and for people that are at that level of a Bob Dylan, a Bruce Springsteen, a Sting, a Rolling Stones, Rod Stewart, all those people, you are going to see those very high multiples for many millions of dollars. That's not all the catalog sales. So, I mean, people see that in the news, and then everybody wants to sell their catalog because they think they're going to cash in big. And that's not the case. I mean, I've seen some things that are 8 and 10 multiples. I've seen even less than that. I've seen somewhere in between. I mean, it really varies as to what the catalog is and how much money it's making and what the buyer thinks that they're going to be able to do with it, and whether the buyer is self-funded or funded by venture capital, and and then there's a whole other market of sale where people are basically getting a loan for royalties, which they then get back, once the company makes their money back, or there's, independent labels that say to one of their artists, oh, well, we'll buy you out for the rights to, these masters or whatever. And when you look at what they're offering, they're, it's like a year's worth of royalties. So it's like, it's not even a multiple. It's not even really worth it. It really runs the whole gamut, but because of what's in the press that you're, seeing these, 25, 30 multiples for millions and millions of dollars, like people think that's what everything is. And it's really, there are those deals, there are deals in between, there are deals that are very small. So it really just depends on what you're dealing with.
Yeah, and the small deals from those indie labels where somebody's going to get, like a year's worth of 1X, and it's they're counting. I mean, actually, I think that's very predatory, that they're convinced that these artists will be happy to get a check for $10,000 because woohoo, I can buy that new car I so desperately need.
Well, and that's why you need good legal representation, because actually one of my clients was given one of those offers and was thinking, oh, well, they're willing to give me this amount of money and it's going to, sounds really good and I could use the money. And then when I looked at the terms and explained to this client, this is only 1 year of your royalties. You're going to sell out forever to get what you would earn in 1 year. Why would you not want to keep it and keep earning that?
Right. Because you're desperate and you're broke, and that's predatory.
But I mean, once we had the conversation, then this person was able to see it more clearly, and that, oh, they're not really offering me the amount that I should be getting for this. But it also depends on what it is, because sometimes there are songs that are hot now, and in 5 years they're not going to be hot. So at that point there's going to be no royalties. So I mean, in some instances it makes sense to sell out, in some instances it doesn't. So it's really all on a very case by case basis, and very, for me, very client dependent, because it depends on what their needs are too.
My famous quote in 1993, after listening to like Nirvana, one of the grunge acts, which I was never that much of a fan. There are a few songs that I liked during the grunge era, but for the most part, not so much. And my famous quote was, I don't think this stuff's going to have any value in a catalog, because you're not going to hear like Smells Like Teen Spirit covered by 101 strings in an elevator someday. Sure enough, about 5 years ago, I got into an elevator in Chicago.
There
it was. I laughed so hard. And the other people in the elevator looking at me like, oh my God, is he having a manic event or something? Well, believe it or not, our hour is up. That really flew by. But yes, I see Ariana just put your website up there, your indie artist resource page, which has contracts. We get asked templates. Yeah, we get asked this question all the time. Well, isn't there somewhere I could just get a contract? Yeah,
indieartistresource.com.
There you go. And Erin's book, Don't Get Screwed: How to Protect Yourself as an Independent Musician, which I endorse. She knows which room in the house it's in. But that's where I do most of my reading. Figure it out. Anyway, always great to see you. I enjoyed our conversation a week ago or whenever it was. We ended up hanging out on the phone for like an hour one night. It was good to catch up. And Hope to see you in person sooner than later. And thank you for
Yes.
doing this. And
Thank
I
you for
hope,
having me.
as always, and I hope all of you another fact show. Thank you. Oh, Libby Harrison says, thank you for another fun fact show. You are welcome. I will see you soon, and thanks again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.